Hello and welcome to the Education Entrepreneur Mentor Series, where we unpack the 5 critical hats that you, as an education entrepreneur, yourself, or with a team, need to wear to be successful teaching online, potentially building a business around your knowledge, skills, and experience. Those 5 hats are being an expert, being an entrepreneur, being a teacher, being a technologist, and being a community builder. Today, Jason and I are going to be talking about becoming the expert. So we're going to be talking about the expert hat. Enjoy this session. All right, today we're talking about becoming the expert. And the first idea we want to dig into is developing subject matter expertise. And I have this idea around craftsmanship and what does it mean to be a craftsperson or a craftsman. And really, I think the main strategy here is it's all about lifelong learning. It's a huge commitment. And once you commit, you really have to commit, because you can do a project in school and learn in shop class how to build a wooden toolbox. But if you really want to become like a finished carpenter, you're going to need to spend years in that industry. And so there's a big commitment, but it takes continuous improvement and lifelong learning. And some of the ways I do that is once you commit, like I committed to online courses as an example. Well, first it was just a fascination, but I really committed about 15 years ago. I just fell in love with the industry. And once I decided to do business in this area, both as a course creator and later with an agency and later with software, it's just a commitment that I've kept up with. And once you commit as a craftsperson, it's really important to keep up with your industry and not rest on your laurels. And one of the ways I keep up with the industry of online education, influencer marketing, online coaching industry, course creator industry is through YouTube, podcasts, newsletters, books, and blogs. It's sort of almost like entertainment for me.
Yeah.
To spend a big chunk of time on that. And the other part of lifelong learning is just not stopping and asking for help, whether that's coaches, mentors, community, peer masterminds. That's part of being a craftsperson, is that continuous learning. So for example, a couple of years ago, I joined Dan Martell's SaaS Academy, which is designed for software founders. I spent 2 years in the program. It was a coaching program, community. There were 300 training courses in there. I kind of looked at that like my non-traditional master's degree.
Yeah.
When I signed up, I committed for 2 years. And the other piece, which is really fun, is making time for experimentation. We've been doing that lately in our businesses with AI tools. I was recently trying to create a course with all AI, and I'm making a course about that from our community. But it's not just about studying, it's also about experimentation. And yeah, for me, I'm just constantly experimenting, constantly studying my industry and my fascination, looking at competitors, seeing what influencers are coming up in the space, what's new with the tech. And I feel like I have my pulse on it like an obsession.
Something that stands out to me is, that I think we both do, is curate this media diet consciously. And I go through phases in my life where something is different is in focus. Am I being a developer or a father or working on the business? And when I'm working on the business, I'll update my YouTube subscriptions and, put different things in my watch later, on Reddit. If you're on Reddit as a site and you just look at what they show you, it's all dogs doing backflips and people breaking their legs and whatever hilarious things. But if you actually subscribe to the subreddits that are related to business and your topic, you start getting that as a news feed. So I hide all the poker, parenting, politics, unsubscribe from all that stuff, subscribe to all the business stuff, and immerse myself. I'm reading books. So it's the book I'm reading, fiction I have these business books I want to read. I'm in a business mindset. I'll start reading the business books so I kind of change my media diet across all the different forms, and that helps me stay in the zone. So even when I'm relaxing and going for a walk and listen to a podcast, it could be, if I'm working on the business, it's like a business podcast instead of a comedy podcast or whatever might, also be in there.
Yeah. And just to piggyback on that, I like to, when I am walking, it's learning time for me, or when I'm exercising. So if I hear something like I need to implement that, I like literally email myself while I'm out, just like a note to jog my memory. And also I appreciate, like you mentioned watch later on YouTube. Yeah. I also like Slack myself all the time using our instant messenger. And I also have like trusted people. Like if Jason sends me a Slack message with like, hey, check out this video, like I highly value it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's like the human feed of like curators that have similar interests.
Something I wanted to talk about, like how do you develop subject matter expertise and really dive in and learn something. Like one of the big ideas I have is around writing to learn. And it's not my idea. I think there's a name like called the Feynman technique, Richard Feynman, the physicist. So the basic idea is like you don't really understand something until you can explain it well in the simplest terms, and forcing yourself to write about it forces you to do that. And so more recently, like folks like David Perell, James Clear, and Anne Lamott, like all talk about this like power of writing to help you organize your thoughts. I think writing is unique. Some folks aren't good writers. So maybe it's, making videos forces you, or like doing audio. If there's some other medium that kind of works for you, drawing, diagrams. But I think writing in particular is kind of special about organizing your thoughts. And so, tactically, I would, recommend blogging. Like you're trying to learn about something, you feel like you have, I don't know anything yet. What do I have to write about it? It's like write about your experience learning about this thing. A tactic for that, if you're like, Jason says write something, but I don't know what to write about, is this concept called an E-bomb, which I take from the 30 by 500 course by Alex Hillman and Amy Hoy. And that's basically like when someone asks you a question, or sends you, the E stands for email. When someone sends you an email and you answer it, that's content. It's like, oh, other people have that same question, put it on your blog and answer it maybe a little bit better, a little bit more long form, go into it more deeply. And so that's where you can find these content. Or if you have a question and you answer it. And then the other one is publishing it. Like, so don't just write it down and put it away in your journal. There's something about putting it online and other people can read it that like forces you to really nail it. So often I have an idea and it's in my notes, and then when I'm like, I'm going to write this and publish it, I'm like, I don't actually understand that as well as, or like, I thought I knew the history, but I don't. Let me read and get it more clear. And I always thought like in college, like everyone struggles to write, and you're like, I'm trying to get like 100%. And that means like, I like followed, like the best practices of writing, and it's so artificial. And I didn't really learn to write well until I started publishing for other people to read. And it's like there's an audience and you have to like explain something to them and transfer knowledge. It forces you to really do that well. And so like in my career, like where this came up was the Investor Geeks blog, which was like my first kind of WordPress project online. Me and two other friends had just come out of college, and we had decent jobs, and we had 401ks for the first time. And that literally was probably like one of the first blog posts is like, what is a 401k? And as we learned about it, we wrote about it like, oh, this is what it is. There's different kinds, and here's how you should think about it. So every time we learned something about investing, we would blog about it there, and it really forced us to understand what we were talking about. And we had an audience, and we built an audience from that. But also probably the biggest value we got from that was just learning all those things and how to manage money. So now later in life, when business is going well, I know all these things.
Yeah, I think writing is critical. And it's almost like it's going out of fashion. Like what do kids want to be when they grow up? They want to be a YouTuber. Mm-hmm. It's about video, visual, the rise of Instagram and everything. But writing, it's not just blogging. Like social media is writing a script for a video is writing emails, writing a business plan is writing.
Yeah.
Communicating to your team or your friends is writing. Text messaging, it's all writing.
Yeah.
So it's like the super skill. And you mentioned blogging. I think there's a misconception that like, oh, is blogging dead? Everything's on social media now. That doesn't mean you shouldn't blog.
Right.
And, really owning your library of content, especially while building in public and what you're learning, it just sharpens you so much. And it's all about putting in the reps. So yeah, nobody's a great writer at the beginning or, graphic designer or teacher, but just putting in the reps as a subject matter expert, all of a sudden it's that whole thing about you overestimate what you can do in a day, but underestimate what you can do in a year.
Yeah. And I think on that point of, is blogging out of fashion? there probably was a moment where on the internet, content wise, you could learn something, become an expert, write a blog, and kind of become famous as a blogger. And now it feels like you said, YouTube, social media, it's different. It's like in the moment. It's shorter attention. It has to be outraged, not just kind of like, look how smart I am. And that's like ChatGPT knows everything anyway. Like I don't have to like search for a blog on what a 401k is. Like Google just tells me when I search it. It's still a good method to organize your thoughts. And then once you have that content, you can repurpose it. And you like, okay, I wrote the blog post now. You want to, record yourself talking about it and share that on social media 10 times. So if you as part of a bigger marketing strategy, like you said, it's like you still write a script often before you video record, you write a draft before you talk to your team, sending emails and stuff. So it's still a good skill as a baseline for, even if as a marketing engine, it's not as strong as it used to be.
I think just one more point on that I call it a news item. So if you're going to do a marketing campaign about a new product launch or a sale or something important, the first thing I do is write a blog post about it or a page of content on the site. Yeah. And that becomes the hub of all that other stuff like social media, building a course about it, sending emails, all this other types of writing. But that blog post, the news item, is the core of everything.
If we're talking about educational content, if you have ideas for courses and lessons and things, like writing a blog post about one core aspect of it and sharing it around and trying to see how it sticks, see what's interesting to people, that's really useful for helping you in the early stages of, figuring out the content.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about inner game. As a subject matter expert looking to teach online or just being an entrepreneur, there's a lot of inner work that has to happen. The biggest thing I see is imposter syndrome. Like, who am I to do X, or I'm not ready, kind of perfectionism creeps in. And what I've learned over probably 15 plus years being an entrepreneur is that entrepreneurship is personal development. It's like in my opinion, one of the highest and most useful ways to improve yourself. But these things creep up like imposter syndrome and self-belief issues. We hear about things like fear of failure, but actually fear of success is a bigger problem. Like, not what if I fail, but what if it works? And now my high school friends are going to like see me and I have this like new identity and like, oh, I remember when that guy was doing XYZ and now he's like teaching business or doing whatever. Like you kind of get all this like get in your head and creates this imposter syndrome thing. Everybody deals with this.
Yeah.
I would say even like presidential candidates as an example, like deal with that, like in the highest job positions. If you don't have imposter syndrome, you might be a psychopath. But one of the ways that I work on that I've learned over the years is shifting the focus. Like, don't make it about you and the perception of you. Just focus on helping people. Because as soon as you transition the focus from like, I need to be perfect to how can I best help these people, some of the weight of imposter syndrome just kind of melts away. And the other thing is, I've noticed this at Lifter LMS as an example. It's been going for over 10 years, and pattern recognition is something that entrepreneurs do, which we'll talk about later. But one of the things I've noticed with the projects that are successful, the people that, make the $1 million or get 300 enrollments on their first sale, or the first time they offer their course or their membership or whatever, is that these people all have this mode of consistent and perfect action. So like they're okay with like little micro failures along the way, or I'm like 80% happy with this course, let's just ship it. Like they overcome.
Is that the same as I've heard of like a bias towards action as like a skill?
And I add the word imperfect, a bias towards imperfect action, but it's forward. And the other thing that really helps, and I think this is kind of like writing, you have to put in the reps, is just developing a thick skin. Because when you go on the internet as a public expert or entrepreneur, there are, quote, haters, or you get judged, you're on stage. And the reality is there's a lot of mental illness in society, a lot of negative energy you get online is really more of a reflection of the person who's given that out. And of course, nobody's perfect, and if you can admit mistakes, if you do make a mistake and you get some negative blowback, but just having thick skin, it just comes with time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've both seen that in our companies at Lifter LMS and Paid Memberships Pro, that like when you're doing customer support and working with people, you know, sometimes people are like frustrated, they're angry, you know, maybe the tone's not great. But after you do it for a decade, you're just trying to help these people. You understand their project's really important to them. You understand there's all these cultural differences and people are in different emotional states. It's not that you get immune, but your skin thickens.
Yeah, you take it a little less personally. It's like you said, it's not about you, it's about them.
Exactly.
It's like the mental switch.
Exactly. And if we're all coming from a frame of like, we're just trying to help.
Yeah, yeah.
The whole business is just the business of helping. And if you're coming to us for support or coaching or content, it's just a frame of helping. One of the things I wanted to talk about in terms of a story related to this, and imposter syndrome. One of my first course projects I did with my wife, and we did it in the organic gardening and permaculture niche. And I wanted to get other course creators, like more famous people. So like, here's imposter syndrome. Like, who are the best organic gardening and permaculture experts in the world? And there's a guy who had the best-selling book on Amazon in the topic of permaculture named Toby Hemingway. And I was living in Montana at the time. He was doing a talk over in Idaho or Washington State. And I was just kind of dreaming a little bit with my wife, like, you know, we could just go over to that talk, film it, talk to him about it, get him to become an expert on our platform. All he has to do is say yes. We'll just make the pitch. And I was like, to my wife, Sam is her name, and I said, just send him an email, tell him all that stuff I just said, and just ask him. And I was joking when I said this, but she didn't really see it as a joke, and she emailed him. I just said, finish the email with just saying, where do you want us to send the check?
Yeah.
And she literally like wrote him that. And he said yes. And like a week later we filmed it, and then he put it on his website, and then we got a bunch of traffic. We did more stuff with him. But sometimes you just got to be a little bold to get past the imposter syndrome. And there's just people are just people.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, we made a good offer. He said yes, and we did a partnership.
And imposter syndrome is everywhere. And like you said, if you don't have it, that's almost something that's wrong. And the people who don't have it, to me anyway, they're kind of annoying. Like the opposite is what, like a know-it-all who kind of, you know, and those folks, I guess, have a different path where they can fake it till you make it. But I think I start to see in others, like if you dive deep and build relationships with folks, you kind of see how other people are imperfect. And you're like, oh, like I'm as smart as them. I should be able to do this too. And I guess it's just something you build up over time. The other thing you talked about was like dealing with the haters, the hate you get. That's the negativity from stuff. If you're putting content out online, building courses and putting it, you know, making yourself a public figure, exposing yourself to that, you're just open up to it on a scale. And we know as humans, I forget what it is. Like, I think it's, humans process negative things like 4 times as much as positive. So that it's like in investing, there's like, I forget what they call it, like negativity bias. So if you know, someone says something bad about you, like that hits you like 4 times as hard as if someone says, hey, your hair looks nice. You're gonna be like, sure, that's good. And I have posts about this, tons of things to deal with that. But I think one thing that's important early on that helps is to seek out that positive and ask for it and be open about it. So sometimes, like example, that we got negative reviews that were hitting us on like the Paid Memberships Pro product, and we had an emailing list, and it was like, let's just email them and say like, hey, could you say something nice about us and give us a review? We really appreciate it. Boom. And then like a bunch of customers came back and gave us some reviews, and then we could like dive into that. And yeah, it's good to process that stuff too, because there is underlying the you know, whatever the negativity that's in there is like, there's kind of a point. So you're like, hey, is there a point to this? Is there a way that I can learn from this? Cool. Take that out and then, you know, try to deal with it. So another, you know, thing about inner game related to that maybe is I see a lot of folks who give up too early sometimes, and they have big dreams. They want to make $1 million, and then they only make a little bit of money, and it feels like insurmountable. And so a concept that helps there is to think about getting just 1% better every day. And this is a concept that James Altucher talks about in his book, Choose Yourself. And there's other flavors of this, but it's like a focus on incremental growth. And so it's, when you're shooting for some big goal, this many members, this many subscribers, this much money, you could get upset on that path when you handle setbacks. And you talked about having thick skin helps with that. Another thing that helps with that is starting small. So there's this tactic. So it's like, hey, I want to make $1 million a year. I wish I could credit this. We'll find it. Who talks about this? But it's okay. You want to make $1 million a year, and that seems hard. What would make that easy? And you're like, if I had this, it'd be real easy to make $1 million. So like, if I had like 1 million email subscribers, I just need $1 from every them, and I could do that. Oh, cool. Okay. Well, how do you make 1 million email subscribers? Okay. I don't know. Like, what would make it easy to have 1 million email subscribers? It's like, I don't know, if some other guy with a mailing list with 10 million promoted my email list, and I'm making something up, but that's that kind of thing. Like, you can scale back from your big goal and come up with the small goal that's like, this is the next step. What's the next good step for this? So I think thinking about that and focusing on those small steps, and also like always be learning. So this is like a trick is like of handling setbacks. If you set out to make a course and sell it, it's the first time you've ever done it, and you're like, to be successful, I want people to learn from this and make money off it. That could happen, but it might not. But one thing you can control is like, you can learn from the process. At the end of it, you'll know how to create a course and promote it and sell it and put it out there. And so I always like try to have that with every new project. It feels like a little risky or brand new, is like, how can I always be learning? How can I, like, even if I fail, still pull something from this? I guess like a version of all these things I'm thinking about this comes up often in like maybe the indie hacker space, or people who are trying to build a business on the side. They set a goal like, I need $10,000 a month, and that will replace my like nice cushy job, and then I can do this full time. And they build up a system, they get attention, they start selling stuff, they create a way to sell things to make money. And like after like 6 months or a year of work, they're making like $1,000 a month, and they're like, I failed. I'm only making $1,000 a month. I need $10,000 a month. And they feel like they're 10% of the way there. But in reality, like an experience of watching people do this and our own experience going through it, is like they're really halfway to 10,000. Like that first step is so hard. Just getting any money is like a big deal. And of course there could be like problems with the market or the product that you're building that kind of limit its potential that it might not grow to 10,000. But the effort part of it is like, you've done half the effort to get, if you're at $1,000 a month, you've done half the effort to get to $10,000 a month. And I think people don't think of things that way. So it's like, that message sometimes helps people like keep pushing when they're ready to give up.
Yeah, failure is feedback. That's how I think about it. And it's sort of like a reframe. Like, I heard a really cool reframe that stuck with me as soon as I heard it. This is like inner game stuff. You know how a lot of people say, man, I'm crazy busy. Mm-hmm. I heard this guy on a podcast being interviewed, and he never said that. He said, I'm active. It's like, I'm not busy, I'm active. Like, he would reframe what the interviewer was saying to like put a positive spin on it, or a productive spin on it. Yeah. And in terms of 1% better every day, I don't know the math behind that. You might know, but like, if you do get 1% better every day, you're like 1,000% better at the end of a year or something like that.
Yeah, it compounds. It's crazy. Yeah.
And then one way I noticed that, which kind of ties into the imposter syndrome thing, is I went, the first time I kind of started getting out from behind my computer and going to industry events and things, nobody knew who I was, or was not very well known. And only a couple years later, I'd show up at similar events, and like a lot of people knew who I was, but I was writing, I was publishing, I was putting myself out there, I was being authentic. And then, but it didn't feel like it at the time. But every day I was just shipping a little bit, trying to help people, making imperfect content. And that just compounded to becoming a micro celebrity in a niche.
Yeah. It's nice to have like a buddy in that process that can help. For me, I need a buddy to do this. I don't know, maybe some people just on their own, to like really, when those moments come up, like celebrate them as wins. I'm always like moving on to the next thing. But it's nice when someone's like, oh my God, that's crazy. Everyone knows you here. Like, that's a big deal. And you're like, oh, okay, felt normal. Or like $1,000 a month on the side. That's crazy. That's awesome.
Yeah. And getting off zero, like you were saying, like oh, you've made $1,000, it's a failure. Like I see it all the time. I'll talk to a course creator who is like, man, I only got 3 sales. I'm like, yeah, but that's not 0 sales.
Yeah. It's like a big deal.
And that can be very different in a couple years. Let's talk about creating influence.
Yeah.
And I've actually never been comfortable or a fan of the phrase like influencer. Maybe it's probably my own limiting beliefs or imposter syndrome or whatever. What came before influencer? Like, was it guru or they all have their challenges, right? Even what we're talking about today, being an expert, like, okay, subject matter expert. And it's a little counterintuitive is sometimes like I'm a really strong introvert. So it was hard for me to like take the stage and, just put myself out there on the internet. But eventually I just said, okay, I guess I'm doing this. And over time I got comfortable with it. But the other thing I found with that, when you do take the stage, that's kind of the big idea is like, at some point you got to get it out of your head and onto the web and, you know, be public. And, I think it's a lot of work to try to manufacture a persona or a brand. So just being yourself authentically, and you can be like the professional version of yourself. So for example, if you have a bad day or something bad's going on in your life, you know, it's sort of like going to the doctor. The doctor still shows up for work, puts on the white coat and gets the job done, but they might be having a bad day. There's like some little bit of professionalism that you just show up.
Yeah.
But you got to take the stage. And I see a lot of, I've heard this in another community. They have like a name for this person. They call it Good Idea Glenn, like a person with a lot of ideas that like nothing ever happens or there's never visible work. And if you don't do it, you're never going to create influence. And one of the things, if you are going to create influence, I'm a big fan of this idea that your vibe attracts your tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So the more you act like yourself when you take the stage, and the vibe you put out there, you're going to attract people like that. I noticed that, for example, in Dan Martell's SaaS Academy that I joined. Like Dan's like a smart entrepreneur dude, and he had a bunch of software companies, but he's also like kind of into fitness and like lifestyle and making sure relationships are good and stuff. So I kind of think of him as like full stack. So when I get in there, I'm like, oh, there's other people in there that, yes, they care about business and growing software companies, but they're also like, you know, care about lifestyle and a lot of bootstrappers in there and stuff. And I was like, cool. Yeah. Like the vibe he was putting out there kind of attracted a great community. And a couple tactical things about creating influence. The first one is, if you haven't done it yet, you need to read Robert Cialdini's book called Influence. And he even has a second book called Prefluence. I believe that's what it is, about what to do before you try to influence. But Cialdini goes over the 7 things, which are reciprocity, social proof, authority, liking, and I think there's one more I'm missing. And once you really get all that stuff, it helps give you a roadmap of like what to do. I think reciprocity is one of the easiest ones to understand, which is if you want to create influence, give something away for free.
Yeah.
So tying into what we were talking about earlier, like when you write a useful, valuable blog post that somebody finds value in, that's like a form of influence. You're giving away something for free. If you like stay committed as a craftsperson to a subject matter, like I'm a total online course nerd, that's like consistency. That's another part of influence is that. And then just being authentic as you do that, it works. And the crazy thing about Cialdini is a lot of his research was around cults, like how do cults create influence, like cult leaders.
Yeah.
So when you're reading the book, you're like, man, this is a little gross. Like I'm not trying to become a guru or manipulate people.
Right.
And I think the difference between positive influence and manipulation is intent. Like, are you just trying to help these people and influence them in a positive way? Or are you trying to take their money, get them in a cult and pull them away from their family or whatever that is? And then I think it's really important. I think a lot of people miss this step. If you are going to create influence, is to choose your audience wisely. So sometimes when you create a business, you think that, oh, well, it's for everybody. Is it really though? Do you want to work with every type of person out there? And so like make a choice about a lot of, it's just, and we'll talk about this more later about your customer avatar and niching and things like that. But I kind of had a aha moment. Of course, as a human and a idealist, I do want to help everybody. I want to save the world.
Yeah.
But like, I think you do your best job as an expert, really picking a tribe or community to help. And that whole community thing, the tribal thing, is real. You know, from my story, I've moved through several tribes. Like I was kind of anthropology guy in college. I was after that climber, mountaineer guy. Then I was a dog musher guy in Alaska. Now I'm a software guy, a tech entrepreneur guy, and I move in these tribes. And I think there's a lot of loneliness out there. And if your vibe attracts your tribe and you want to help these people, you like these people, that creates a lot of sustainability in your project.
Cialdini's book is awesome. Influence feels like this magical thing that just happens, and then he just lays it out in like very clear left brain. This is the reality of it, and you're like, oh, it's the playbook. And there is that risk, like when you know, there's other things like this. When you know the playbook, it feels like manipulation, and you're like, it might be inauthentic. It's really hard to find that line. But I think like in marketing in particular, it can feel like sleazy at times. You're using these tactics and you remind yourself like, we actually make this thing that they want. Like we're actually helping them. If they actually complete my course, it's good for them. And so if you believe that in the core, then it can help you use some of these tactics and understanding that you pick up from like a book like that. You were talking about like choosing your audience wisely. And I guess like the customer avatar is about that. I'm reminded of the, who's the guy with the pumpkin patch video?
Oh, I know what you're talking about. It's a personal finance thing, or it's about finance.
Yeah. Well, I think it's on business, but that he's like, every so often you take a list of all your customers and you think of like, which customers do I hate and they cause the most stress, you know? And it's like, okay, how can and which customers do I like? And they're the most awesome and I love working with them. And it's kind of course, after that, then you should like, okay, well, how can I rearrange my business so that I'm serving these people I like and not serving these people I don't like? And it could be as simple as like on your copy, be like, this isn't the product for these whiny assholes that end up in my customer chain.
I recommend that, by the way, for when you're writing a sales page, having a section, who it's for, 3 bullet points, who it's not for, 3 bullet points. It's like a good exercise.
Yeah. Every bad customer that bounces off your sales page is a good outcome as well, including like, this is really for you, come on in. But if you're the kinds of folks who get into this business, like we're good at solving problems, we like helping people, and you just kind of like do it reflexively when you're in the weeds, and then you find out you got to take a step back and be like, what are we doing? Am I actually doing the thing I really want to do and helping the people I really want to help? And am I in the tribe I want to be in? I think you touched on this too, of building influence through trust. Like you said about like giving stuff away for free. And that's almost like a core value that we have. We build this free software, just solving problems for people, delivering value that you'll naturally build up a reputation for being someone who gets something done and delivers. And I think a lot of folks, maybe if you in the content space, you're building like a course or education, I think very rarely do you have like that top secret, these are the 5 ingredients that make the thing, and I have to like hold, don't share that unless people give me the money. A lot of people feel that way, but more often you probably should switch your mindset. And it's like, give away your best stuff for free. And it's like, just put it out there for free on your blog, send it to them. If all you want to do is hook them to sell a thing, like what's going to do it best, but like the big idea, the nugget, the most useful tactic, the clearest description of like how you go from, where you are to where you want to be and get your outcome. So like the clearest way you can do that, the best content you have is always good to put out for free. And then people will pay for access to you for having it in like a clear, organized way. So, I mean, like a tactic like that I often recommend for people who want to build courses is like, so I talked about blogging as a way to learn. You blog, just blog, keep blogging, write the thing, give it away for free. And when you're done, like if you did that once a week for a year, now you have 52 decent articles and you're like, all right, cool, take that content and now build it into like a different format that you can sell. And you'd be surprised, like you feel like, oh, they can just get my stuff for free, so why would they pay for it? But the real typical interaction on this website is someone searches for something, they see your one good article, and then your post like promotes, here's the book that explains everything. And you're like, oh, you got me. Let me get the book that explains everything. There's also speak with your actions instead of your words. And so it's like actually do it, talk about yourself and your journey instead of kind of theorizing. I felt that way when I was like writing notes for this. Sometimes it's kind of like, so that pumpkin patch, I wish I could remember that guy's name. That's a story I heard that's useful. And I could share useful stories. Like we're in the space, we have lots of useful stories, but that's actually when I did and worked, right? So I actually went through that process a couple of times and I try to go back to it every time. So I can give, I'm really talking about something that is authentic to how I operate. And like maybe it's just another rephrasing of this. Gary Vaynerchuk has a book called Jab, 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 Right Hook. And he's thinking about like, if you have emails, if you have like a 4 email series, don't always be selling. I think that's like always be selling is probably something someone says, but actually I think you might have a better outcome if you're like, give, and then you deliver value and now they're on your side. And then you're like, hey, by the way, I sell this thing and it could help you too. And that's like a mode that, I use both. So it's like, it's funny. I'm talking about like selling, but it's like these concepts build influence towards a sale, right? So it's kind of these, if you think about it in that way. A story also related to Gary Vaynerchuk that's like the antithesis of this. I have some of the stories I have in here are like, you said, like you learning from your failures. Early on, I had this website, winelog.net. It was like a social site for wine and you could keep track of the wine you're drinking. And there's a couple other websites in the space. Seller Tracker is the one that was like the old school one that's still around. So they won. Shout out to Seller Tracker. Keep track of your wine with Seller Tracker. It's a really good app. But at the time, they were like this old Windows 95, kind of slow, not really Web 2.0 website. And we built like the modern version of it. And there's another site called Corked. And there's all these wine websites were kind of coming up. And Gary had like a wine podcast and he was advertising on all our websites. And I remember he bought an ad on our site and I had like $1,200 for an ad placement for a month or something. And he's like, you should give it to me for, I forget how he tried to talk me down to like $600 or something like that. And I stuck to like 1,200 and he was like, all right, Jason, he's like, I'm going to give you $1,200, but like, you should know, like, you probably should have took the $600 deal and just had the goodwill towards you. It was great. He gave me like this little business nugget. And at the time I was like, I don't know. I didn't want to like give up the money. I guess I was like, that's what I think it's worth. It should be worth. And I don't care who you are. It was kind of my attitude at the time. And fast forward for a bunch of other reasons, like Gary Vaynerchuk like bought that website Corked and built it into his brand and it became part and we were friends, but like we interacted before, but our wine website didn't tie onto Gary Vaynerchuk and made some of the biggest wine websites in the world, right? So it's kind of like for $600, I kind of like lost a little bit of influence with Gary Vaynerchuk, which would have been useful. And I wasn't thinking at the time, and I do feel it's funny. It's like when you put a price tag on something, that's your price. And you should stick to it. And I'm not like a big biz dev guy, but I think in that moment, if I really was thinking about like what was best for that website, if I was like, how do I build influence so that I can turn this into a bigger thing? It's like, oh, cool. You got the attention of like the biggest, like early social media guy who's talking about wine right now. Like building influence with him and his connections was way more important than money at the time. And it's kind of like, instead, that conversation of like, cool, I'll do an ad for your paying. And what more can I do for you to help you? Like that would have paid back in spades. If I had been helping Gary instead of the other way around, like what would have, how would have that relationship developed?
Giving away your best stuff for free. Like in that case, maybe not give Gary the free ad, but like reduce the price, give him the hookup.
Yeah.
And one way I think about that is this concept from, I think I first heard it from Eben Pagan, is moving the free line, like not necessarily all the way to free, but information wants to be free.
Yeah.
So like you should be giving away uncomfortably free amounts of stuff or valuable stuff. And like you said, like, but if it's also like available on the internet and other places, what you're actually selling is your way of supporting it, your unique style that just resonates with people or whatever. But like with Lifter LMS and Paperships Pro, we give away so much for free with our core softwares that are in many ways more powerful than really expensive paid solutions. And it works.
Yeah.
So moving the free line and then show, don't tell. I like that a lot. It's easy to like talk about things theoretically. And some of the way I built influence in WordPress is like, I didn't just say like, You should use WordPress, build a blog, sign up for a hosting account here and install the software.
Yeah.
One of the first courses I made was how to build a WordPress website in a weekend. I showed people how to do it. I just sat down and turned on ScreenFlow and recorded it, turned it into like a 6-module course, put it on Udemy, put it on YouTube as a video playlist. And then what happened is, my idea here of creating influence is like, give away your secret sauce, tell people your process, particularly if you have an agency or whatever, because at that time, people were watching my videos on Udemy or on YouTube and they're like, you know what, this stuff is actually kind of complicated. Can I just hire you?
Yeah.
So by moving the free line, then the clients came in, not just from my local community, but from all over the world.
Yeah.
And that was uncomfortable to be like, well, shouldn't I just build websites for people? No, I'm just going to teach everybody how to do it themselves and show them, not just kind of tell them about it. Let's look at the difference between being a guide versus a guru. I really love this framing. And a guru is sort of like a religious figure who preaches and speaks truth and this is the way. But a guide, and I actually come from a background of guiding, wilderness guiding. So I understand guiding at a deep level. A guru would just be like, climb this mountain, and a guide is going to be up there adapting, working with people, dealing with setbacks, dealing with weather changes. And I think also being a guide takes a lot of pressure off. You don't need to be the guru giving a sermon. You just need to help people get results. And the big idea here is, instead of just having quote, the best information as a subject matter expert, be like a results getter for people. The guide doesn't climb the mountain for you. They help you get that outcome of climbing the mountain successfully, or whatever your niche is, starting a business, getting in shape, finding the love of your life. People want results. They don't necessarily want you to give them the golden book. There's a underlying motivation and result or transformation that people want. And I think it's really important when you do become a guide to marry a problem. So don't necessarily think about who's my target market. You should think about that, but what problem do you want to solve in the world? What wrong do you want to right in the world? And just obsess about it. And I can't even really explain how I got obsessed about it, but I love this idea of people being able to basically create information products and create this digital content. Anybody anywhere in the world could pull it up on a web browser, put their credit card or their PayPal account in and build this online business around it. I just fell in love with this problem and tying it to the problem of education, because education has a lot of potential to make societies better, improve people's lives, and help people economically and so on. I just fell in love with the problem. And one of the ways to, kind of get good at this, of being a results getter, a helper, a guide, is to build the name for it is a customer advisory board. So regularly I meet with some of our users, our customers. I'm hearing what their challenges are, what their wins are. It totally informs how I think about what product do we make, or you hear about how are we different from the competition, what's our positioning. And then when I think about problems and marrying a problem, I heard this from a guy named Dev Basu, I believe, that people only buy 3 things, which is speed, certainty, or insight. And there's a 4th one, which is to stay out of jail. But that one's more this is why we hire accountants at tax time and so on, to stay out of jail. And usually this speed, certainty, and insight, sometimes it's a combination of those, but there's usually one primary. So, if I was going to do a health course, you could take different approaches. Speed, you're going to get this health outcome really fast. Or if I'm going to do certainty, It's going to be like, okay, this is actually going to work this time. If it's going to be insight, it's going to be, yeah, the industry is completely wrong, and I'm going to give you like new ways to think about health and whatever the specific result I'm trying to get is. So I often think about speed, certainty, and insight, not just with marketing and selling, but also our approach to this problem and how we solve it. Because the speed, certainty, and insight, people aren't necessarily buying you as an influencer, they're buying the result. But even under the result is that quality of speed, certainty, or insight.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is, this is a classic mistake that experts make. I call it like the Library of Alexandria problem, where people don't necessarily want, especially these days with information overload and internet everywhere, infinite scrolling. It's not about giving people like so much stuff and like 100 hours of training and 50 bonuses and all these modules and stuff. Like, what's the minimum effect? A guide, wants to get you to the top of the mountain as efficiently as possible while staying safe. And that is, they're not trying to teach you everything they know about like mountaineering or climbing or whatever. It's just like, we're going to help you get this result as efficiently as possible. I think it came from Tim Ferriss, the minimum effective dose. Like productivity folks are all about this idea of like, well, what's the minimum I can do to get the maximum output? What's the 80-20? So instead of giving your customer as an expert, like, hey, here, check out my awesome library of knowledge, it's like, I can get you this result quickly. So in terms of guiding, I feel like we've been guiding people at Lifter LMS for over a decade now. And we're not just selling them a product. We're not just giving them software. We're not just providing technical documentation. I talk to users, customers, people who are just in the industry, people using competitor products. We get on live calls and we do all this like personalized guiding. And one of the last kind of ideas around that is, when you're helping your market, they really want you to still be able to help them even in challenging circumstances. And this is how guiding is different from being a guru. A guru would say like, this is the way. A guide will be like, oh, I see you're having this challenge. Adapt this way and you'll still get the outcome. Person B, different challenge. Okay, let me help you adapt. And over time, you can bake that wisdom into your actual process. So maybe it's more automated or whatever. But humans are not robots. So eventually you do end up with some personalization there. And that's why they like you.
I'm hearing there in this guide, the difference between a guide and a guru is that instead of, here's my knowledge, take it or leave it, you're taking responsibility for the outcome. And I think that's a challenge in that, like, when you're trying to teach someone something and you feel like I'm giving them all the information, but they're not getting it, is that their problem? But really, you could be a better teacher by meeting them where they're at. Maybe you said how to get from A to C, but they're actually at B. They need a different path guide to get there. And so I like that. Taking responsibility for the outcomes that you're given instead of just like being an info dump on people. And I hope it's useful. I think you'd be more effective.
And on that note, just like a pro tip, I think it is shared. Like, some people just be like, oh, I have churn. My people didn't renew their monthly membership or the annual thing because they just didn't do the work. But there is a piece that is shared. Like, the people do have to do the work.
Oh yeah.
There is some failure that's outside of your control, but there's a lot we can do as the expert to help when there are setbacks.
Yeah. We all know those folks who, it kind of goes both ways. Like, we know those folks who are like the idea people who'd never actually get over the hump of shipping and getting something done. And if they're also selling to an audience of people who sometimes like, I would like to lose weight, but I'm not actually going to do anything to make a difference. The folks who are super successful, they find like a different way to talk to a different subset of that group, and maybe some of these folks aren't hopeless, trying to get results and dealing with it on that level. At the same time, I think you don't have to know everything. So maybe that's related. We talked about a few different ways of like focusing on helping people and being resourceful. instead of omniscient. Like, and you said like the Library of Alexandria, right? So it's kind of like, oh, it's not just dumping everything there is to know about this. If you know one tactic of how to get to A to B that will help people, like, congrats, you know something that you can turn into content that you can, give away and sell to help people. It's like a mindset shift of like being the kind of person who can find the answers instead of having them. Like we said, don't be the know-it-all kind of, you'll figure it out. And when you figure it out, then you can share that experience with folks. Building a network of experts to consult with. You don't have to be the only one who knows. There's other folks. Don't be scared that like they're your competitors. They're also like potential partners that, oh, this, software is better for this use case. You should use that software. It's good for that. Or, my content focuses on helping this target audience, but you fall outside of it. It's good to know. It's important to like communicate confidently that you'll be able to find the answer to them. You want to be known as someone who's able to find the answers and follow up and come back. It's like, I think it's crazy impressive. Sometimes through customer support channels or interactions with folks online and checking, they throw a zinger and you're like, I have no idea. I never heard of that one. And then if you come back the next day and you're like, I couldn't sleep, I was thinking about this and here's everything I learned about it and how it fits into the stuff I do know. They're like, wow, that feels like a guide, not a guru. And you're like, oh, this is someone who's really helping me with my specific issues, get to where I need to go. This kind of mindset is something I had when out of college. I worked for 2 years as a consultant at Accenture. It's like one of the, what do they call it, the big 5 consulting companies. And that experience is crazy because as like a really young person who didn't know much, I'm thrown like into these businesses and kind of people are paying a lot of money for this guy who's supposed to have the answers. And I don't know anything yet. This is my first job out of college and I've only been here a couple months. So they really bill you and charge for you as if you have the answers. And I think it's clear to most of the people on the, the business side that are working with you, they're like, this kid doesn't know it. But super quickly, like, and they train you on this at Accenture. They do a good job of like, when they ask you a question, you don't know the answer, you tell them like, don't worry, you hired Accenture, the whole team. There's a team of experts and I'm going to talk to them and they're going to give me an answer and I'm going to tell you, and I'll facilitate this. And so you do that a couple times and they don't sweat the fact that you're this fresh young kid who doesn't know anything because you've proven that you're helping them anyway. There's this other aspect, of that you're still useful to them at finding the answers, even if you don't have them. And over time, that's how you become the kind of person after, you do that for 10 years. And a lot of the questions are, I've seen this a bunch of times before. Here's like the 3 things that help people. You become the person who knows it all.
Being the person that can find the answers can also help you actually just launch. So I see it all the time where let's say you're doing a membership site and you have like individual trainings or mini courses, and maybe you think you have to build like 100 of those before it's ready to launch. But if you just have like a few ready and you offer actual one-on-one or group support, the customers, your early customers will literally pull the product out of you. Yeah. You're like, oh, okay, they need help with this now. So now you don't have to just assume you know exactly what this person who has come to you, made a purchase, asked for your help needs. There's like a real feedback loop and you can just kind of create in front of them like, I don't have that for you yet. And then by the time we meet next week or next month, we'll have a new training on exactly that problem. And so I think that's really cool. And it allows you to just launch and pre-sell and just help people more in real time, giving them exactly what they need. And once your community gets bigger, you'll start seeing patterns of that and you'll intuitively know like, oh, this other thing, I've had 7 people who really need help with this thing. That's where, so your like quarterly plan or your annual plan just kind of gets mapped out in front of you and you're not guessing because you have paying customers asking for your help with X.
Yeah.
And this is the benefit of lifelong learning. When you make the commitment to that is you're also learning how to learn. It makes you more resourceful because you're kind of you're focusing on craftsmanship and mastery. So you're getting better at meta learning or the act of actually learning, which is part of being resourceful. Let's talk about the customer avatar.
All right.
So this goes by a lot of different names. Some people call it your audience, your niche, your ICP, which stands for your ideal customer profile. And these things all are like a little different. But I think the customer avatar is really the main, the avatar is the way to think about it. So who is the ideal person that's a perfect fit for your course or your coaching program or your online community, your reader, your audience? And how do you figure that out? And the key to that, in my opinion, is to actually obsess about it forever. It's like a forever commitment. One of the easiest ways to do it is to actually, if you're like not sure what to choose and you're like one of these people who's like interested in a lot of different things, I don't know what to make my course about or my coaching program or my online business, just do a previous version of yourself, because you remember yourself. So like when Chris or Jason was just starting an agency and like what did they need help with? It's easy because you kind of know who it is. If you're already moving and let's say you have a services business and you're trying to productize, you kind of already have these people that are paying you money and you can think about productizing what you know, and you're learning about their challenges, and you've kind of already got this kind of avatar forming, like who's my favorite customer, like we were talking about earlier, who do I not want to work with? Like that develops like kind of your anti-customer avatar. But once you kind of have this person nailed down, it could be a previous version of yourself. It could be like your favorite client that also happens to pay you the most money and be the easiest to work with or whatever. Some people also invent like a fictional version, which is fine too, where you just kind of, oh, it's a woman who's just had a baby. She's in this income range. She's just left corporate, whatever. And you're kind of like figuring out this avatar based on demographic stuff like we're talking about there, but also psychographic stuff like, oh, but they're depressed because of this, or, you know, they're really emotional about this topic and so on. So you just kind of map out this avatar of sort of like you're the FBI or whatever, and you're profiling like some suspect you're looking for. It's one way to think about it. And one of the things I like to do when I get into the customer avatar is do a pain and opportunity map. So like, what are the most painful things in this person's life? What on the opposite side of pain, what are their goals? Like what opportunity are they seeking? What would they pay money to get closer to? Because it's either away from pain or towards pleasure, basically. And like, if you can kind of find the top 6 pain points and the top 6, like what do they want to move towards? And then which one of those is like primary, or what's another theme that like governs all of that? Is there an identity transformation? Like there's this idea that you can have your avatar, you give them incremental improvements, but if you can actually like change their identity, that's the most powerful product you can sell. You can charge the most for it. So an example of that would be like in the business niche, if my program is going to help you quit your day job and become an online entrepreneur, 6-figure entrepreneur, this is like the classic example. That's like an identity transformation. Somebody who's stuck in corporate, hates their life, hates their job, to entrepreneur with a working business who's happy and has income, impact, and lifestyle freedom. So that's like a transformation. So think about that. It is okay to help people with incremental improvements, but those big flips of identity transformation, like I've seen one that's a little more counterintuitive is I've seen a user help people move to Australia and become doctors in Australia. So it's like, that's like a major change. Yeah. And that's what his program was all about. And the other thing that happens, this is just more of a nuance with the avatar. I've often, when I started with Lifter LMS, I had this subject matter expert person that we've been talking about here as the avatar, the aspiring course creator, the monetized knowledge person, somebody who has a lot of passion. They want to create impact, income, and freedom by helping others through teaching and charging for that with an information product. There's a lot more that goes to that avatar. I won't go into like the 2 pages of it, like who they are. But what ended up happening is I was moving forward with this. I started noticing all these agencies and, WordPress professionals and stuff showing up like, oh, the people that build sites for clients in this niche for courses or membership sites or e-commerce stores, and they want to diversify into digital products, but they have this like agency person that's helping them. And I started looking at who's following me on social media. It's like, oh, the people that actually interact with my tweets and stuff is like these agency and WordPress and technology people. So I ended up like having a split. There's two avatars, and no matter what I do, like, okay, we're just going to focus on this one. This other one's always here. And so that sometimes happens. But I think it's a really valuable exercise to figure out the avatar, obsess about it, and just be open to, it's not something you set in like year one and you're good. Like it evolves and it changes and you end up in weird situations like I'm talking about where I have two.
Yeah. A common template for that shows up in like business to business space is there's the person who uses your training and then the person who pays for it.
Yeah.
And they have different needs and avatars. And if you want to like reach that audience and sell to them, you kind of have to map both people, the person who's paying for it and the person who's you're actually, delivering the content for. Man, a couple mistakes I see folks run into when they're working on their customer avatars. And I say that because I've run into these mistakes several times over and over. Like I'm actually talking about myself, my friend who's had these issues. But I do see it a lot because we help a lot of, similar businesses and people too. One is like resisting, like not going niche enough, not making it specific enough and resisting that under the pretense of like, I'm trying to make a big thing that helps everybody. And I've done that. Like it's a membership platform for all kinds of things. And, the problem with that is that this customer avatar is a very useful tool when you're writing sales copy and when you're figuring out how to build the product and when you're figuring out the content or the, learning. It's almost like you want to go through the exercise of really having a very specific customer avatar and feel what it feels like to write, like you write sales copy and it's so hard and you're like, you're not talking to me, you're talking to Chris Badgett. He's this old. He's right in front of you. He looks like this. This is what he loves. And you're like, oh, you're just talking to Chris Badgett. It flows. You're just like, this is what he needs to know and what I would tell him. Some people resist that. They want to niche down. And I think also like if you do, it doesn't mean you can't help everybody. It's just a bullseye. It's just the center of the target and you'll still help a bunch of people that, but there's someone in the middle that you're writing towards.
It's just a quick example of that. Like Apple Computer, like when they did the crazy ones, the artists, the misfits, all this.
Yeah.
A lot of other people still have Apple products besides the, kind of the artistic, innovator type people.
Yeah.
But the avatar, and maybe it still is like that. But it doesn't mean you can't sell to and help other people. Yeah.
Related to that, when you're building your customer avatar, I think a mistake I made early on was thinking about like demographic information, like man or woman, or they like, expensive things or cheap things or how they dress, or like you almost think of like building a Facebook ad and you can choose the demographic traits. And I find that stuff is not as important when you're building your customer avatar as the things you talked about, which were like, what are their pain points? What are their common challenges? And in like we were figuring out use cases for Paid Memberships Pro. And there's a bunch of people who build courses, and the thing that's common among them is not like, if you think of like a yoga course and like a, health food course and a get fit course, the thing that's not common is that like they're women and they, like, I don't know, demographic information about those folks. It's not as useful as they wanted to build a website to sell their course. That's what's common among them, right? And specific and so that's the top. And then specifically, like, what was challenging about it? Was it that they, had struggled to make the content? Was it that they struggled with the tooling? Was it, and then you're like helping them with their specific problems and challenges instead of, I think sometimes people get caught up in the fluff of like, I'm trying to speak to women, so it needs to look and smell this way.
Right.
And you're like, no, focus on the challenges. Another thing to focus on is, the people who want to pay you. I mean, assuming you're doing this, you don't have some outside funding source and you're just spreading the word. You're trying to turn this into a business. I find like a very specific version of this. And when it comes up is you're selling something and there's like a cancel, people can cancel and they churn. And I think early on, there's almost a lot of recommendations to, hold on to those people. So you only have 3 customers and one of them left. And you're like, oh my God, it's like a third, like get them back. I need that $100 a month or whatever they're charging. And you struggle. And I don't think you should totally ignore that person. You should get the feedback, but very specifically, like they came into your orbit and they left. Like that's a very clear signal that they don't want to pay you for the thing you have currently. So maybe take some feedback and you can use that to figure out, like, am I creating the right thing? But that customer that left is like not your customer avatar. Like, it's like, is that the person you're serving or not? If they are and they left, that's like a different story. Now, okay, I don't want that person to go. So then think about how you could keep them. But a lot of the people who bounce out and kind of cancel out and churn are like, that's a good churn. They actually don't need the thing. And you don't want to strive too hard to kind of focus on those folks. And I think we also talked about like various forms of consulting and customer interaction as a way to get this feedback. So I guess I'm thinking, how do you find out it? I'm assuming the situation where you have a little bit of traction, you're selling something and you want to grow. And so you want to find out more about your current customers so you can figure out how to find them and make more of them. And it's like focusing on the ones who pay you. And I think you can have these like consultation calls with them. Sometimes if you're selling like an info product, it's like, hey, for an hourly rate, you can still talk to me. Or, I mean, in the early days, like probably put an hourly rate and then say, but actually it's free for the first whatever. Or I'm giving, everyone who signs up gets, instead of $300 an hour, they get to talk to me for an hour for free. But like talk to your customers and do, like you said, that there's so many reasons why like products of all kinds, folks who build them start out as consultants because they were very close with a customer and trying to solve specific problems. And then they realize other people have this problem. So if you kind of skipped over that part and you kind of have a little bit of success, people are buying your stuff, it's like maybe take a step back and consult some of them and work really closely with them to figure out who they are and what problems they have. And so like some tools you could do. So like that consultation calls, put an hourly rate for people to just talk to you if your time is busy. And then we did Paid Memberships Pro, and I've seen other folks do this like what we call do it for me setups. So it's, and in like the educational space, I think it's pretty common of like, I have a course, but if you want mentorship and like a more, high touch help through this, you can pay me more and then I'll do that. And you can price those lower. It's a way to make money. So it's like another way to make money off your audience and stuff. But I always think about it as like, oh, this is me like learning about like not just a customer, but a customer is willing to pay more than what the average customer pays me. Like it's a super valuable customer to kind of dig into and try to figure out. And I guess quickly, like when Paid Memberships Pro did the do it for me, like how it worked, we were selling for at that time, I think like, I don't know, like $100 a year, you gain access to the software and support. But for $500, we'll spend 5 hours like helping you to set it up. And it was a way to talk to a lot of customers. And again, that thing of like figuring out who you like to work with and who you don't. I remember the stats when we did the do it for me, like 50% of them were perfect. It was like, this is our ideal customer and they just need a little bit of help. And we help them exactly how we can. We get a little bit like, oh, we build a tool that we can give to other people, or we fixed a bug, or we learned something. It was like perfect. And then after, the 5 hours was up, like they went on their way and they didn't need us anymore. Another 25% in that cohort they needed more. So it went really well. And then they're like, you're the smartest WordPress person I know. Can you do all this other stuff for me? And we're like, we're not consultants. We don't do online. We're building a product. So they like, which is, it's a good problem to have. And you got to build partners of people that you can kind of push that work off to. But it's like, you help me with this. Can you help me with my whole life? And you're like, we don't actually do that. But then 25% were just crazy bad failures. Cause we were taking the money up front and then saying, hey, we'll solve your problem in 5 hours. And just the expectations were off. And they were quote unquote bad customers. But that experience of like, digging it like, wait, why was it bad? Why did they think they would get this when they were only going to get this? And using that information of how to change the copy and the documentation and the product itself so that when those people come, they kind of deflect before they pay you. Yeah.
One more pro tip with the figuring out your avatar and who's going to pay you is to just pre-sell them. Like don't even create anything yet except for the sales page. So I think I want to sell to this person. This is the problem I want to solve. This is my mechanism of how I'm going to solve it. And you can set it up. You can use our softwares to like take the money. You can be totally transparent and give them like, hey, it starts like a month from now. And even say like, if I don't get this many orders, I'm going to refund your money and so on. So pre-selling helps. I love the idea of like, if you're not already a consultant and like really understand the avatar and the solution and the problem space, do coaching first before you try to do a course, and do private coaching. Work with them one-on-one. Even if you're losing some money, like based on your hourly rate or whatever, it's very validating to make sure like this avatar is right. I can help them. I'll over deliver through private coaching or even done for you services. And there was a framework I learned, which is really simple, that can help with this, like structuring these things, which is DIY, do it yourself, DWY, which is done with you, and then DFY, which is done for you. And the passive online course with no support is sort of like do it yourself, good luck. The done with you is like, we've got courses. We also have like weekly office hours and so on. And then done for you is more like an agency. Like you're hiring us and we're going to get you the result. We'll get it done for you. So using those frameworks help. And yeah, it takes time to adjust and get that avatar offer clarity. So you got to experiment. It's part of the learning process. Let's talk about practicing with intention. I'm pretty convinced the reason why a lot of folks fail or lose momentum is that they not only did they not commit to a problem for an extended period of time, but they didn't it wasn't the right problem for them, and they didn't really go all in on a single problem. They got shiny object syndrome. For me, if you're going to spend all this time creating courses, coaching, community, maybe writing a book, maybe doing public speaking, becoming the person for this, category of problem, it's a huge commitment. Like, so in my view, if you're not willing to focus on this avatar and this problem or problem set for more than a decade, or at least a decade, it's probably not worth doing. Maybe you don't love the space enough, or you just don't have the passion to keep going. So it's just to make a decade commitment when you choose your problem, particularly if you're one of those people that has multiple interests. Maybe you like fitness, maybe you like investing, maybe you like cooking, and you're like, I want to get into this space. I'm not sure which one to focus on. There's sort of this test you can do called the on-stage test, which is like, if 5 years from now, if you're on a stage giving a talk about this topic and your mother or your family or whoever is in the audience watching you, like, are we good here? Are you still doing this in 5 years? It's called the stage test. And, really putting in those 10,000 hours. So your products and programs will get better with 10,000 hours. And if you've already spent 10,000 hours in this space and that decade commitment, it's going to work. But it's a huge commitment, so don't take it lightly. I think this idea of get rich quick, overnight success, it's just not helpful, because it's not the way it works. And when you do marry these problems and stuff, you can revise as you learn. There's sort of two ways I think about it, or patterns I've seen in the space. When you become a subject matter expert, there's kind of, whatever your niche is, you can either be like, I'm the person for X and I have this signature program that delivers this result for this person. It's called this name. And then every year you kind of rebuild it, you deliver it again and again through cohorts. Maybe you just redo all the content every now and again, and you have a signature program. Then there's more of like the serial entrepreneur who's like, okay, I'm really committed to this avatar, and I am going to build the library, but it's like, I'm taking micro problems and I'm like building a thing here. And I just keep going until I've essentially surrounded this person with help. And it's not really a signature program. It's more of like a doctor patient thing, like where the coach is like prescribing, like, oh, you need help with this problem. Take this training in my program, come to office hours on the weekend. It's less of like this signature structured thing and more of a prescriptive, hey, you're in the club and then I'm here to help you and prescribe training and content as needed. And the other thing that's okay to do is to admit mistakes. Maybe your signature program has a major problem in it and like, hey, I think I need to take this part out. It's not helpful. Or maybe I structured my offer so that it's actually not starting early enough in their journey. Or maybe I'm not staying with them after they get to this point and they really need me for another part, or this middle part is not working. Like if I'm helping people build an agency and I show them how to do that, but my clients are having trouble getting clients. Like, yeah. I think what I'm teaching, maybe it's not working. I got to readjust. I got to learn. I got to be resourceful. And then in terms of practicing with intention, I take this seriously. So like when I make a commitment, like when I got into sled dogs or I got into the LMS space or I became a podcaster or I started a YouTube channel, I knew I would be doing it 10 years later. And that decade commitment is just, it's both sounds like a lot of work, but it's also freeing. Like, you know what, I could see myself in 10 years, and it helps rule out things that maybe you shouldn't focus on. Like whatever's hot of the day, you might see an opportunity, but like, do you see yourself doing that in 10 years?
That's great stuff. What's funny is like you brought up 10,000 hours. And I know what it means, and you know what it means. There's like a famous essay about 10,000 hours, and that's like the average time it takes for someone to be labeled as an expert for something.
Or mastery.
Yeah, to develop mastery. And
yeah,
that's the thing is like we're talking about becoming an expert at something, and one way definitely is to like do it over and over again, like 10,000 hours, and you kind of like through osmosis, you'll accidentally become good at it, like almost anything if you just do it that often. But I think when practicing with intention will get you there faster and better. And I think like any skill I've tried to learn, if you're trying to get better at guitar, just learning songs and playing is pretty good. But if there's a reason, like there's a reason that like coaches who aren't the best can still help people who are the best, is like they're walking them through exercises that, for guitar, like stretch your fingers and learn, memorize, these chords and changes and notes and keys and things. So setting goals for each practice session, like one small concrete thing to improve over time. And so recognizing every time you write a blog post. I did it for this podcast. Every time I'm recording something I wrote. So for this it was don't cough. and I wrote like the overarching topic of this discussion is becoming an expert. So I was like, oh, remember to like keep tagging that. So I put that on the top of my notes. And over time, like, these things will become more natural, and that's really kind of how you become better at a skill. And I think it's also how you can learn with intention as well. So yeah, you do the same thing over and over, but better each time. And then I think another version of that is not to be scared to copy from the best. And so you might feel that you have to do it your own way or pay your dues, which is kind of true, but it is good to just copy. And there's an ethical way to do it, like whether it's copy as practice. And even, I brought up the guitar. It's like you watch like a really good guitarist and you're like, let me try to learn that someone else's song, and there's like a good course. I think it's called Copy That, is like a sales copywriting course, and there's like 10 different examples of really good sales pages, and it's like literally put this on your screen and then type it up and feel what it's like to write those words as if you wrote them. And like building websites or like building courses, like a good, if you there's a course that you really like, it's like just steal some aspect of it. So you're not going to copy the whole course, but it's like copy the structure of the course, but it's your content. It's about a totally different subject matter, but you just steal the structure of it. And if you steal it, be like, hey, give props to it if it makes sense. Or kind of, there's other ways you can do that. So you can take your favorite parts of some of the other material and apply it to your own work. and don't be worried about doing that. Again, like, you don't have to be the guru, the person who knows it all, and this just comes out of, your glorious magical brain. It's being transparent about how you figured it out and working towards it helps.
I think copying, I mean, that's in humans, there's mirror neurons in our brain. It's how we learn language, and kids copy their parents and their siblings and stuff like that. That's just what makes us human. I've heard it called R&D, which stands for rob and duplicate. That's a funny way to say it. Like, so you want to R&D, but you want to actually give credit. Like, you've heard us cite, like earlier I said, Moving the Free Line, that's Eben Pagan. You found the 10,000 hours from Malcolm Gladwell and so on. So good, cite credit. And the other thing is to just think about remixing, because a great book, like a nonfiction book, came from research where there's a lot of different ideas. So what plagiarism is like not giving credit, copying exactly, not mixing and matching with other things. And so I think that's an important thing for an expert, especially a lifelong learner. Just because you heard something really good from somebody else in your industry, you can use it. Just give them credit, mix it into your style and your framework and everything, and you're good. That's how, like, great books are written.